Beautiful building, the Beckman Institute here, and I was particularly proud of this project. So SmithGroup endowed this lecture series in honor of the Institute's founding director, Ted Brown, my colleague in chemistry, who turns 96 this October. I'd like to briefly recognize Nate Koshman, who leads SmithGroup's higher education studio, and Hans Thummel, who leads its science and technology studio. They're both in the audience today. Yeah. I'm very excited to introduce our speaker, Cyrus Wadia. He and I go way back. We started in similar fields. He was a nano person, I would say, long ago. And he holds a Ph.D. in energy resources from UC Berkeley and an MS in chemical engineering from MIT. I first met Cyrus when he came to our campus about 10 years ago as part of the Materials Genome Initiative. We had a Midwest workshop on that. At that time, he was working in the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy under President Barack Obama. He served as Assistant Director of Clean Energy and Materials Research and Development there. I found that people who work in government are very service-minded and thinking much beyond their own labs and sphere of influence. So that's clearly true with Cyrus. He served as a Silicon Valley entrepreneur, a senior advisor at McKinsey & Company, a senior program officer at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and the founding co-director of the Haas School of Business, that's at Berkeley, their Clean Tech to Market initiative, which is still ongoing today. Cyrus has worked at several large corporations, director of worldwide product sustainability at Amazon, and vice president of sustainable business and innovation at Nike. Then he began his current role as CEO of the startup Activate. His journey is super interesting, and I know he'll bring a perspective to today's lecture, which is entitled Filling the Science Leadership Gap. He's seen over his career the value of collaboration and doing innovative work, which is totally what we do here at the Beckman Institute. Please join me in welcoming Cyrus.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. So great to be here and be with all of you today. And even though my current title is CEO, my first and durable title is still scientist, chemist. So I'm really proud of that, and really happy to have the opportunity to be here with all of you to talk about this very important topic. As I was reflecting on what you said, Kathy, I was here 10 or 11 years ago talking about the Materials Genome Initiative. And believe it or not, I think that was probably one of the last university lectures I had the opportunity to do before jumping feet first into the corporate world, where I hadn't really had the opportunity to come back to a university like this. So it's very nice for me personally to be back and to be in this environment and have this conversation. I fundamentally believe, and the topic of the talk we're going to get into is really about leadership, science leadership in particular. But I fundamentally believe there's no endeavor more important that any of us could be working on today than investing in our future talent. And everybody in here is no stranger to that, because universities such as the University of Illinois are one of our best examples of training our future generation. And so with that, let me jump in. All right, so I'm here to talk about how people and the investment in talent is how we're going to move society forward. That seems pretty kind of generic type of statement, but we have a crisis in leadership today. So according to a 2023 Harris U.S. News survey, 86% of American respondents are disappointed, lack confidence, lack trust in our current leaders in society. I say, some portion of that, a large portion, would say strongly disappointed, and then, over 80% acknowledging that there's a leadership gap. So why is this? I'll give you a couple things that I'm noticing. Number one, these are guesses at why our confidence in leadership is where it is. Number one, problems are getting harder. Much more complex. These are system problems, global problems, whether we're talking about public health or climate change or the introduction of technology like artificial intelligence into society. These are not easy to solve problems. And I mean this when I say it, no one individual can fully comprehend the system in which these things operate. So they're hard problems, and maybe our leaders aren't set up for success. A second is I talk a lot about incentives, and incentives have gotten so complicated and misaligned to our society needs that in some cases, maybe our leaders, if they were here with me, they'd say, my hands are tied. I can't possibly do the things that are being asked of me because of the way the system is incented. And they wouldn't be wrong. That may be a slightly overly generous point of view, but they wouldn't be wrong. And then a third thought I had is, as I thought about this question, is back to our training. And the training at the earliest stages of individuals. We may have drifted hard right towards growth and all the fundamental tenets of capitalism, as an example, here, at least here in this country, and we've left behind social good, and that happens at a very early age. But really, I think that type of training happens fundamentally in universities like this, in terms of when you have that moment of intersection with an individual to set them on the course. So who leads us today? Who have we as society entrusted to take us forward, and how are they doing? And I think that the truth is, when these leaders are asked or in a position to create the very incentives that govern them, and that could be about how they're enabled or limited. It could be about how they're training themselves in the future themselves. I think we've fallen behind. I'm not so sure that the things that have gotten us to this point and the models of leadership that have gotten us to this point are the same ones that are going to be needed to take us into the future. And that is kind of coming fundamentally back to the complexity of the problems that we're dealing with. So as we grapple with these existential challenges like climate, I'll add one more thing, which is the role of scientific understanding is so fundamentally crucial. Because there is technical innovation, there's science that needs to be in the room, at the table, as we go after solving these problems. These problems cannot be solved in the absence of science and technology. And so I believe that's paramount. And I would say, most, if not all, of today's problems require a certain level of technical expertise. And we as society, we all benefit when we take a science-based approach on any problem. So at the exact moment we're facing our hardest challenges as a society with a deep science need and this somewhat historic low confidence in the leaders kind of taking us forward, at that exact moment, there are invisible forces out there that are marginalizing science, that are, eroding trust in scientists and their voice and their opportunity to lead. This is what I see out there, and it matters. So the decline in engagement in scientists as trusted advisors in both more of a policy setting and corporate setting is something that we're observing. Let's pause. We'll do a quick trivia question here for you. So in U.S. history, we've had one sitting president with scientific training, formal scientific training. Anybody want to guess? Shout it out. You got it. Right, first guess. What about our Congress? Let's talk about that. Our current Congress. Who wants to guess the percentage of Congress people with a STEM background right now? Just throw it out. 12%? Not quite. A little lower? Not quite 2. 5. 9%. Okay? So the presence of science experts in this policymaking kind of narrative is, to me, shockingly low at the exact moment in time when we need them the most. Does that surprise you? Does that surprise anyone in here? So I think we can do better. And let me talk a little bit about why I'm so passionate about this problem. My story, I feel like, is sort of, in my mind at least, broken into two distinct phases. The first is me coming up as an engineer and scientist, figuring out what I was going to do in my career, finding my way to entrepreneurship, and then chance moment in time when I was swept into public policy, and that put me on a very different trajectory. So let me first give you my full story on that part one. I was trained at MIT, chemical engineering. I spent 5 years there, bachelor's and master's, and then it is now mid-90s, 1996. And like some of my friends and colleagues at the time, I put all of that to the side, my technical training, to go out to Silicon Valley because something was happening clearly. And you could never at the moment realize the moment you're in. That's true always. But we were in a very interesting moment. Everybody was cutting their teeth on internet technology and e-commerce. And these were all new concepts. The companies that we use today, they didn't even exist. And so I found my way out there into a business and management consulting capacity. So I was in a way starting to retrain myself with on-the-ground experience. I had to put science on hold for a minute to learn. And that led me to entrepreneurship. I was part of a successful startup, and I watched the whole journey up the mountain, crashing down the mountain that a lot of folks at that time were experiencing. Fast forward, I didn't want to leave this idea of entrepreneurship, but I wanted to apply it to something that I really cared about. And I did a little bit of sort of personal discovery. And I said, the problem I really want to work on, this is sort of my dream at the time. I want to bring solar energy to 7 billion people on the planet. And let's work on that. And so at the time, I felt my only opportunity to do that was to go back to a university, get into a Ph.D. program, do fundamental science, invent the thing that's going to do that, and then be the one to take it out to the market. I had this dream. And even as I explain it now, it somewhat feels remarkable that, I thought that was all possible. So many things had to go right. And by the way, several things did. But I got to the end of that PhD, like many of you in here, there were patents, there were papers, there were acknowledgments. I was really cutting through, but I looked ahead and I said, this is going to take a long time, number one. And two, when you are a scientist working on this technology, this type of technology, nobody understands it better than you. So nobody's going to doubt the possibilities more than you. And I had a lot of skepticism that we could actually solve the final remaining hurdles, the scientific hurdles, that would actually put this into the market. But more importantly than any of that, there was really not a clear support structure for me to pursue that path. I cobbled together a role at the national lab and the university, and I was allowed to continue to do my research, and I thought that was the path I was going on. But then I mentioned this kind of chance. I then was invited to come join the White House and get into policy. Now, this is not something I was looking for. This is not something that I even knew what it meant. But I worked under the President Obama administration, and one of the first things President Obama said in one of his very first speeches as a president was, I'm going to put science back in its rightful place. He said that. Look at the speech. And that was enough for me. I said, I want to know what that's like and be part of that. So picked up stakes, left the science behind again for the second time in my career to go see what it means to work at that capacity. And again, like I said, this set me down a very different path, one of scaled leadership, understanding kind of how these decisions get made that really impact society every day. And it sent me down kind of this next phase of my career. So White House, Nike, Amazon up until last year. So I think about it as, you could talk about it as mega brands or pushing yourself to the edge of scale, both of which are true. And I had a front row seat to how leaders lead, how science is either in the room or not in the room. And that has had a profound impact on me, and it's kind of informed how I think. But I think a few stories could help clarify this point on, is science in the room or not? Are our leaders leading as responsibly for societal good or not? And a lot of it breaks down in terms of time horizon. And back to the incentives point, that there's often a time horizon mismatch between the decision that has to be made today and the payoff of something that, if we invest now, could help society down the road. And these are not easy judgment calls. But sometimes I've been worried that science is not in the room, and if science was, maybe we'd have different outcomes. So let me share a few kind of anecdotes from my career that, kind of maybe would be, I'd consider formative in my thinking. So number one, I'll talk about corporate decisions. Every day, it's already happened today. There's a decision somewhere deep in the stack of a big company, the same institutions we rely on to move us forward. There's a decision being made that's putting us 5 years behind on climate. Guarantee. And it's not just one. So these are the invisible forces and decisions that, we don't have we're not in those rooms, but they're happening. I'll give you an example. So when I was at Nike, I had the just unbelievable opportunity to work on product. I was talking to you guys about Space Hippie earlier today. Really proud of the work we did there on new product that was lowest carbon sneakers out there. How awesome is that? I mean, who gets to work on the lowest carbon sneakers out there for a brand like that? I got to. And we put one on the market. We launched it in New York, went extremely well. This thing was a rocket ship, so everybody wanted it. It was 80% less CO2, 90% less water. It actually was more profitable when you pencil it out at scale. It was the unicorn. It was like the home run. And so everybody's celebrating it, including my team that sort of put this together. And there's a lot of investment that went into it, a lot of hard work. And the CEO, I had an opportunity after the launch to sit down with the CEO and some of the senior staff. And the question was, well, how'd it go? Give me the update. And so I kind of walked through, great launch. The media loves it. The consumers love it. It's doing what we thought we should. We got to scale this. Let's invest in scaling it. So everybody's, yes, let's invest in scaling it. And I said one more thing that was probably less popular, which is when we scale it, and we're going to, our overall carbon impact as a company, massive Fortune 100 company, global scale, this innovation alone is going to win us 3% of our carbon ledger. It's not a small number. One decision made last month to air freight product because we were late to market or late on forecasting wipes that away completely, minus 3%. This was sort of a heavy moment because here we are all excited about the optimism and sort of all this technology and innovation. This could solve so many things, and it can, but make no mistake, there are business decisions being made every day that create more of a headwind, and it's not anybody's fault. It's, again, how have we created the incentive structures for the institutions that are leading us? This is real. I'll give you a White House example where I felt like science wasn't fully in the room. And it was, again, a story that I know well because I was there. Sometimes a lot of folks will ask me, we had a few questions at lunch today. What is it to work in the White House? What is that even about? Honestly, I didn't know until I got there, and it's still a little hard to explain, but basically the White House, they bring in extremely deep technical leaders. I happen to be there to support clean energy and materials, and materials genome came out of that. But another area that I worked was rare earth elements, critical minerals. Now, it's pretty much on people's minds today, but back then it wasn't. And until there was a flare-up between China and Japan. And so the way this happened was there's a story that breaks out on the New York Times about a fishing boat. Believe it or not, this fishing vessel was in disputed water. Japan seized the boat and the captain. China, give us back our boat. Japan, no. China, all right, we're cutting off your rare earth element supply right now. And all of a sudden, this is international news. And it's a news story about a geopolitical struggle, but on that day in my role, everybody started looking at me to ask the question, what is a rare earth element and why do we care? And so what happened next was really exciting in a sense. I got a chance to work with the US trade representative on trade policy related to these minerals. I got to work on innovation policy, getting more funding opened up to our agencies for innovation. I got to work on working with our national security teams and Department of Defense on defining better what is a critical mineral and like are we sure we have a reliable supply. There were so many exciting elements, and I happened to be there at the right moment in time, having that enough of an experience and background and expertise to be the one on point to sort of shape the policy. And then we had, as we're building the policy, and the president had weighed in, and my boss, John Holdren. I'm going to tell like a side note about John in a second. We were moving this thing forward, and make no mistake, this is a moment where science was at the table. This is, in a way, sort of a triumph of science, whereas if science wasn't at the table, this could have been a very different outcome. This could have turned into a fight, that is unnecessary. It could have turned into bad policy. But we were asked to testify to Congress, and in showing up to Congress, I'll never forget this day, because we testified, and the line of questioning sort of indicated to me a lack of understanding, a lack of an attempt to understand the technical and the science depth of the policy that we had created, and in a way, a failure of leadership without going into the details. And so afterwards, I was talking to John. John Holdren was a science advisor to President Obama. He was my boss. Huge amount of respect. Everything I do today, and in some small part, is due to what he said to me next. He said, Cyrus, if you want science in the room, you need to work on getting more scientists in the room. And he fundamentally believed that was the most efficient, best path to getting science at the table, because we cannot rely on science alone making its way. He was not wrong. And there's many other examples. During the questions, if you want to ask me more stories about any part of my career, please do. But, if I could, just say one more thing. We as a community, as society, we benefit if we nurture our science leaders and folks that are equipped with the knowledge and the entrepreneurial acumen to drive sustainable change. This is not just about skill sets. I know we talk a lot about that. This is about mindsets as well. And so I'd say that more investment is needed in the right system that elevate and support these types of leaders. And now I'm going to turn to talking about one that I'm very proud of, and that is Activate, where I am currently. So I'm going to introduce Activate. It is an amazing organization that I have had the real privilege of joining 6 months ago, and now as the CEO. And what I'll kind of take you through a little bit of the history, try to connect a few dots here. So who is Activate? So Activate, I'd say, is the bridge between scholar entrepreneurship, something that probably everybody in this room has some connection to, or at least learning about, the bridge between scholar entrepreneurship and commercialization, and proving something quite unique with science entrepreneurs, specifically in hard tech. So started 8 years ago as an experiment, a pilot at Lawrence Berkeley Lab called Cyclotron Road. This small team had a fundamental belief, which is right now, this is go back 8 years, there aren't established pathways for scientists coming out of the lab who want to be entrepreneurs. Even thinking about my own story, the support structures, the way you do it, all of that, it's not a trivial transition that didn't exist. So the team at the time, Cyclotron Road, said we want to try something here where we give direct support to scientists to go do this. This turned into a fellowship program, and really a fellowship program to keep scientists in the game on their potential world-changing ideas, train them to be entrepreneurs, and something I'll talk about a little bit later is that to me is an accelerant, not just to the great ideas that will help save us, but also to the skill sets that lead to science leadership that help bring science into the rooms that I was talking about earlier. But we've been at this now for 8 years, and we've seen tremendous excitement and growth and interest in what we're doing, because after 8 years, 188 fellows later, over 95% of our fellows are still at it. They're still these are first-time founders coming from a lab, hard tech science, who are now building these world-class companies. And collectively, all the companies, a little over 150 that have emerged from our program, have raised over $2 billion of additional funding. That's remarkable. And I will say this, that what we provide is quite unique. There is direct funding we give to the scientists, the folks coming out of the lab. If you want to keep people in the game and have them continue down the road of their technology and see if they can figure out a way to get this into the world, into the people's hands that need it the most, if you want to be in that world, you are competing against all these other pathways for scientists, faculty roles, big corporate roles. There's a lot of demand for this type of talent. So we give them a salary, and we give them support, health benefits. We give them additional funding for research and development to continue to work on their problem. And we do this for 2 years. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. Beyond the financial support, which is really important, we provide a lot of things that are in some ways hard to always explain. We have a community of mentors, a network that's there to support. We have a dedicated team that's working with the fellows every day, helping them answer questions. What does it mean to start a company, build a culture, hire my first hire, de-risk this technology? The list goes on. So it's a marriage between all of the different support models. There's financial support, there's coaching, mentorship support, and there's fundamental skills that we're providing in terms of teaching these amazing individuals how to accelerate their learning curve so that by the time they leave 2 years, they're off to the races. And, I would say that entrepreneurship it's a pivotal force that enables scientists not just to commercialize their tech, but again, to put them on a path to different places down the road. And now companies are the things you see and easy to point to. Now originally, I had some slides because we have several of our fellows that come from University of Illinois, right here, connected to but because one of them is here with us, Suds, I'm gonna pivot a little bit. I'm not gonna go through all those slides. I think it'd be far more interesting to this group right now to hear from you, Suds, if you're up for it, and take us through your story and a little bit of depth on kind of your experience. So I'm gonna switch seats with you and take it from here. All right.
Thanks, Cyrus. Hi, everyone. I'm Sudharsan Dwaraknath. I also go by Suds. I got my Ph.D. here at the University of Illinois in 2021 in chemistry. And today I'm founder CEO of Quorum Bio and an Activate Fellow. Quorum is developing microbial fertilizers using synthetic biology. Our microbes provide nutrients to crops, allowing farmers to apply less synthetic fertilizer and maintain or increase crop yield. I'm going to tell you about, Cyrus talked about we need more science leaders. I'm going to make the case that in the university setting, we are training science leaders in terms of potential future CEOs without even really realizing it and without actually capitalizing it. So what do we do in the university setting? you go through PhD, you go through postdoc, then you get a faculty position. 7 years later, you've gotten tenure. That's kind of the default, the standard, the gold standard, so to speak, right? And it's possible for students to go and get that faculty position, whether that's at research heavy institution, teaching institution, whatever they like, because we teach them in the course of the training how to write papers, how to write grants, how to give talks, how to think of ideas. We teach them the culture and language that lets them succeed in the pursuit of becoming a science leader by way of becoming a faculty. Here's what the entrepreneurial route looks like. PhD, postdoc, you then go raise your first bit of pre-seed funding, and I just did that. This Friday I closed my 2 million pre-seed round, so I've just gone through this journey of learning how to enter into this route. And then you work really hard for 7 years, but instead of tenure, you exit your company, you have $50 million, you are a scientist with capital and influence in society. So this is how you become a science leader, through entrepreneurship. And every PhD, postdoc, every single one is a potential science leader by way of becoming a CEO. But we don't actually think of it that way. And here's why everyone is a potential leader. When you get that first check, you go and raise that first few million pre-seed dollars, investors are not investing in your Nature paper, they're not investing in your preliminary data, they're investing in you. And that's something that I had no idea about. They're investing in somebody who has the technical training and the vision for the kind of hard technology that will be dominant in our society in the future. They're investing in you. And so every PhD program, every academic institution is actually churning out potential CEOs, and we're not capitalizing it. What are we losing by not capitalizing on it? Well, here's something else I learned through the course of this journey. Every fall and spring, there's students that come into universities and take courses, graduate students that do their defenses. Every fall and spring, there's investors and new VC funds that have a fresh pot of cash that they have to invest. There might be this conception I used to have before that investors are investing in the next best thing. Only if you have some cool technology, some great preliminary data, some Nature paper, can you go out and win money. And that is false. Investors have this pot of cash they've raised, because there's tons of money out there, and they have to spend it. They have to invest it, otherwise they're out of a job. So it's not that they're investing in the next best thing, they're investing in the next thing. And if University of Illinois, PhD postdocs are not out there with their vision, saying, I can lead the next best hard tech company, then that money goes to whoever's out there, which is often Harvard, MIT, Stanford. So this idea that you need to be ready, you need to have the whole story, it's completely false. We don't think of it when we go for faculty positions. We think, I did my PhD, I'm qualified, let me apply. It's the same thing. I did my PhD, I'm qualified, let me determine the future of hard technology and energy, agriculture, whatever it may be. So that's something that I've learned over the last 2 years. Now, what does it take for someone to leave PhD and actually go and get that CEO position? You need to know the language and culture of entrepreneurship. So in this case, it's not about how to write a Nature paper, it's how to give a pitch. And in the beginning, I think there were some comments that were like, Cyrus, you don't have slides, that's so unique. You know when you go and give an investor pitch, you go and you meet an investor, first call, I'm talking to Coastal Ventures. If you put slides up, they have figured out that you don't know what you're doing. You're new, you're prey. Your first call with an investor is face-to-face. You're confident. You've got the vision for the future. It's an example of language and culture that you need to know to go on the science leadership career path, that is, future CEO. So that, for me, has been possible because of Activate. I graduate this May from that 2-year journey. And there's just no way to learn these things. There's just no way to learn all the little nitty-gritty rules. And there's so many. I have lost investors because my vision was not big enough. I was not raising enough money. I've lost investors because I talked too much about the nuances, the ways the technology could not work, instead of just saying, we are going to revolutionize agriculture. Are you in or not? So there's lots of rules and games and tricks, and Activate has helped me to learn all of that and raise my pre-seed on my own journey. So I wanted to share that with you today.
Thanks, Ed. Okay, I want you to stay up here for just a second. If you guys don't judge me, I want to ask you, Suds, just a few questions that I guess are on my mind. So the first is, the endeavor of entrepreneurship is kind of not like a boilerplate that everybody's experience is the same, but it's a very hard and sometimes lonely endeavor. But curious, after you started kind of going down this road, what has surprised you, either positive or negative? You've mentioned a few things already, but I think just painting the picture of the challenges that you've had to face, especially in the context of having been trained in a STEM field.
I think what has surprised me is that it's not about what I have done, it's about what I will do. It's about how I will transform the world. It's not about my skills, it's about the skills of the people around me, the team that I've built. What surprised me is that your vision can only be too small. The bigger your vision is, in academia, you don't want to get on stage and give a talk and say, like, I have solved the mechanism of that enzyme when you clearly haven't. This is bad, right? You get laughed off. In entrepreneurship, we are going to solve this mechanism and change the way that disease is, So these are things that have surprised me and that are very different than my academic training. And it was painful to go through the learning because I'm just trained not to do that, And so, that's what's been most surprising.
I've struggled with that through my entire career. This temptation for precision, and when sometimes it's narrative and storytelling that's necessary to move people.
Yeah.
And that's largely true, kind of, when you look at all these kind of places in society. There's room for the gray area, but that's hard sometimes being treated this way. One more question, if you have. So you believe in a culture of science entrepreneurship. I sense that you would want to encourage universities like the one we're here at today to kind of invest more in this. But just give me a sense of how you think we can scale opportunities for other folks that could be going down this road. And what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I did my PhD here. I did basic science that I'm really proud of, but I was never sure that it would be in the marketplace in 5 years. And I actually went postdoc hunting, and I would tell PIs, I'm not going to publish a single paper, but I will find your most interesting technology and spin it out into a company. And so I guess maybe because I'm crazy, I already thought that I could be an entrepreneur. But I don't think most people graduate from PhD postdoc programs seeing that is a viable route, regardless of what they have achieved already in their work. So we need to create a culture in academia where you leave, you graduate, and you're like, I could be a professor, I could go work at a big company, or I could go start my own hard tech company. And it's not related to what I just achieved in the last 2 to 5 years. And that can be done through courses, it can be done through intentionally bringing together scientists and saying, look, there's this problem with plastic. Forget about what you know in your training and your thesis work. What could you do to solve the plastic problem? Just dream. That kind of exercise, I think. That's one thing. The second, actually, I'm going to go back to your previous question about what else surprised me, which is related to this. We write these introductions in our papers and we talk about the impact we're going to have on the world, but what makes a successful startup company is not that, it's this, right? So it's money, it's revenue, it's sales. Can you hit 200 million in 5 years? What's the path to there look like? And as scientists, we're not trained. I learned through Activate how to build a revenue model. Today, I'm going to make $250 million in 7 years and exit my company for $500 million. I have the model, right? The vision's there. So that vision, that's the vision investors are investing in. And so some training on how to think about money, economics, business. Where does money exist in our society and how do you get it? Stuff that we're so focused on the test tube and we have no clue, I think. At least I had no clue as a scientist. And it shocks me. Today, $1 million is not a lot of money. I was only making, $30,000 as a PhD student? $1 million is not a lot of money. And there's lots of angel investors, VC investors. So knowing about money in this world, where it exists now, how to make more of it, that's required to translate research into hard tech innovation.
It's amazing. Well, hey, one more quick round of applause, and also just a reminder, Suds, hometown hero, started here, just closed $2 million today. Did I get that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Suds.
Thanks.
You have other hometown heroes. I'm not going to, be able to go into all of them today, but one of the things I'm noticing is that, take Suds for a second. 5-6 years, fast forward, right? Company's going to go well. He's got a vision. He knows how to execute it. But other things start to happen. We're starting to see fellows build these big corporate partnerships. We're starting to see fellows sell their companies and move on to even bigger roles in those companies. We're starting to see fellows testify to Congress. So it goes back to my point that we do have something to solve, getting science in the room where the decisions are being made. We do have an opportunity to seed more science leaders in the long term. And one of the best paths, the fastest, most efficient paths, in my view, is science entrepreneurship. And over the course of the time that I'll be, with this company, I hope to, I can't wait for Sud's story to keep growing and scaling. And, as you can tell, he's on the right path. So let me just close and let's take some questions. I think that, at the end of the day, I'll just repeat. Science leaders, we believe, the optimist story here is that we have an opportunity, and we believe that one lever to pull is through science entrepreneurship, and we're really excited about the results we're seeing, and we're also really excited about conversations like the ones we had this morning with this university, because I would say that it's incumbent upon all of us to be thinking about these questions of getting more science in the room. We're in the business of that. And while I believe one pathway to get science in the room is through science leadership, and I've just made my case for the way into that, there are many, many other things that we need to be doing. And you're already working on many aspects of science, obviously, scholar entrepreneurship. So please keep up the momentum there. We absolutely need it in society, and we need University of Illinois to continue to lead in this space. So thank you, and let's move to some questions if you guys are interested.
Yeah, stay right here, Cyrus.
Okay.
Okay, it's time for some questions. And we have a microphone going around if anybody has questions. Oh, we got a couple right in front.
Okay.
Oh, yes. SmithGroup.
If you could repeat the question.
I will.
Okay.
You say it, I'll repeat it, then it's recorded.
Is there, when you're in the room, you mentioned lunch earlier, you had a very deep discussion. So in that conversation of you and the university, is it, with your perspective on private industry and public policy, could you and University of Illinois and other R1 institutions around the country start a dialogue about what the priority should be on a national level, like climate change or carbon neutrality or AI or whatever it happens to be?
Yeah.
Identify things that are of critical public importance so that the entrepreneurial aspect of the scientists that you're educating at an institution like this can get out and solve those problems. How do you feel about that?
Now, are you asking specifically on me or on Activate, or in general?
You're in
Okay.
that seat.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
do you
Sure.
see that as realistic?
Okay, so to repeat the question, can we bring together the right stakeholders to drive the conversation, whatever that is, so we can move faster on these problems and leverage the fact that, at least in this new organization I'm part of, we sit at that interface between scholar entrepreneurship and commercialization, which, okay. Let me tackle in the following way, which is we don't have a major gap in new ideas in people's imagination. Where we have the challenges are in technology diffusion and technology commercialization. And this is exacerbated when you're looking at hard tech. The things that are required the nutrients that are required to solve complex issues such as climate change. Okay. So when I think about technology diffusion, I often talk about you've got to have the right idea, you have to have the incentives lined up, and you need the right people. Now, I would argue that that idea person couple, like what Suds was talking about, like how folks invest, is the most opportunistic place we can invest right now. And this is a little bit about human capital systems, but how do we continue to invest in people who can translate across all these different chasms? You know, there's lots of different frameworks, you know, get over this chasm, get here, you know, there's this belief in handoffs, all of this. And what ends up happening is, I don't want to call it navel gazing, but, you know, companies focus on their problem. Governments focus on their problem. Universities, they focus on their problem. And we all want to collaborate, but there's no incentive to do it the way that needs to happen. So I think that we have to simplify. And the path to simplification is wherever we can leverage, and in my case, I will leverage the convening power of the platform that I sit to bring the right stakeholders together. And one example of that could be, I'll share a thought I have on this. If I were able to collect in one particular domain what the big science challenges, open science questions are that a company is grappling with, and I can feed that back into the earliest stages of university research, then at least I'm taking a shot on goal that I know is a little bit directed. That is a simple connection that doesn't require, you know, kind of a flood of resources, et cetera, et cetera. Now, there are better approaches to lining up the incentives. For example, one of the things that we were working on in both my corporate experiences was on advanced market commitments, creating pull in a market so that, you know, I wouldn't have to tell the science community that it's important, that they're going to start working on that and all the capital is going to line up. That happens already in a few places, not as much as it should, but those are harder to create demand pull signals. So absent that, I think some convening can go a long way. So.
There's another question
Yeah.
there? Yeah.
Yeah, can you talk about the balance between training and acumen when it comes to science entrepreneurs? So what sort of, you know, characteristics make someone a good candidate for Activate or for science entrepreneurship generally?
Yeah, it's a good question. So not everybody's built to be an entrepreneur, whether you're a scientist or not. And I think about entrepreneurship in the broadest context. Entrepreneurship is not, to me, just folks that are going out and getting VC funding and starting companies. Entrepreneurship is a mindset where if you're trying to drive change, and you might be doing that in a large institution, your own startup, but you're basically leading change, you're an entrepreneur. And when we look at potential scientists to come join our program, we see we cast a pretty broad net, and we see a lot of qualified candidates, many of whom we can't take into our program because we are just that oversubscribed. That being said, when we look at these candidates, we do look at mindsets, folks who, you know, may be coachable, ready to learn, that's sort of the growth mindset. Folks that I think come in with a little humility in terms of how they think about the problems and whether or not, you know, the world is so complex that, you know, the longer you go into any professional career, you realize how much you don't know. And so I feel like there are these core intrinsic values and mindsets that we are able to look at and in some ways screen for and test for before admission into our program. And to me, that level of depth in terms of how we make choices and select our fellows is 100% part of the success formula for how we do it. It's not easy, and it requires a massive undertaking by not just my team, but a broader community that's involved with us, looking at the individual and looking at the technology. But we do look at these types of values and mindsets when we're talking to candidates. Suds, do you want to add anything to that? Because Suds went through this process, so he may have a sort of a little bit more to add.
Oh, yeah. Oh, microphone.
I think the only thing I will add is that just like there's a lot of different types of academic careers, it's not just the full professor at tier, whatever university. You could be teaching focused, you could go to a very applied science focused school. Similarly, entrepreneurship, there's lots of types. You could be a hard tech entrepreneur who just takes angel money and then kind of works slowly, methodically over a number of years and doesn't build a big team. So there's lots of types, just like you mentioned. And I see Activate prioritizing values and your intent and the impact you want to have on the world. And that results in actually a range of types of companies and a range of types of entrepreneurs and a diverse group of entrepreneurs. So that's what I've noticed actually, is the vetting is, and even in the vetting process, if you come across as you already know everything, you know what you're doing, I don't think you're gonna get in. You have to come in with humility, like, look, I want to have impact in the world, I need help, and then Activate will let you in.
Great.
Oh, way in the back.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, hello. My name is Edgar. I'm a grad student here, and thank you so much for sharing all this information. I actually wish that more grad students would be in this room to hear all this. And my question is more about, I believe that the relationship between person and idea is crucial. And to give it an example, today there are people who are working on implanting chips in people's mind, but yet we only recycle 5 to 6% of plastic. So my question is, do you think that is more efficient to motivate and incentivize people who are already trained to solve these environmental problems, or bring people who face those problems? Usually, like, people in developing countries get to see more of the plastic waste results and then train them to solve those problems. Thank you.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Here's how I want to answer that. I go back to one of the things I said. Somewhere along the way, we started taking a turn down a path where in our leadership, the question I'm asking is societal good and benefit in the long run still forefront of their mind, somewhere along the way. And I think we have to bend that curve back. But it starts with not just the folks we've already entrusted to lead society, but I think it does start with everybody. Now, you're bringing up an interesting point, because there are the polluters in the world, and then there's the folks that experience that pollution who are often in the global south that don't have the voice that we have here, even in this room. And they want to be part of the solution, but we sometimes make that hard. So I would say that we do need an army of people out there trained to deliver the change. But at the end of the day, if we're being totally honest, it is incumbent upon us, in sort of with the privilege that we have been bestowed, to continue to be stewards of 8 billion people on the planet, even though we may be a small minority. It is incumbent upon us to lead that change and to release the friction for others across the globe to either experience the benefits of that or do more work in this domain themselves. So that's my personal philosophy on this, and that's why I think it's ever so important that the graduates of this university have that in mind. Just because you've been trained in science and engineering, as an example, doesn't necessarily guarantee you're going to do good in the world. And that's where my head went when you started talking about implantable chips. I went to a different place. And so I want to be clear also. I believe in a society where all folks are empowered. Artists, musicians, scientists, business, policy. The thing that needs to get fixed a little bit is the right mindset for societal benefit. So whatever their platform is, whatever their skill set is, whatever they are offered to lead, whether they're offered to lead or not, they make the most of that opportunity so that we all benefit as a society in the future.
All right, there was, I think Aaron had a question.
Hi, thanks. I'm a graduate here in PhD and postdoc and now on staff, so you have some context for my question. It sounded like one of your setups was that the culture of a university and graduate program is set up towards a professorial track, right? Mm-hmm. So everything about the training and your mentorship is geared that way. And I know you also said that Activate's overprescribed in terms of what you're able to do, but it seems like, is there an opportunity to take some of the principles you have in Activate and the program you have and apply it into the university where it's possible to, if nothing else, give graduate students, you know, this idea that there are other paths.
Yeah.
I mean, because even if you just look at the numbers, like the number of PhDs that are produced and the amount of faculty jobs that are open, I mean, the market is so mismatched. There are other opportunities for people with these PhDs to do different things, entrepreneurship or something.
Well,
So.
you know, it won't surprise you. We're in the game of science entrepreneurship, whether they're fellows that we can support directly or not. And so one of the things I'm challenging my team to think about right now is how do we take the ingredients of what made our program successful, sustains the success in our program, and what are the ways we can bring that to scale upstream to universities so that this pathway becomes much, much more established, much more visible, you know. And then earlier today, talking with some of the, you know, your colleagues here, we were going a little bit deep. Well, hey, is there a way that University of Illinois can be part of that early exploration? And I would definitely welcome that possibility. So.
Yeah, I think we have one more question before I make another announcement.
Okay.
So, I think in addition to ensuring that science is in the room, right, as you put it, ensuring that there is also diversity in the room along with that science is important. And so I'm curious whether it's Activate or other models you've seen, because this is something that's a challenge in our own campus. How do you think about getting folks with more diverse backgrounds participating in innovation and entrepreneurship?
Yeah. I love this question, and it's a really important one to close on. You know, I, as a Leaders Activate, and my team at Activate, we are very, we're disappointed with the progress we've made on this exact line of questioning because, you know, we're in some ways responding to a pipeline that's available, and we have goals in my company to make that pipeline more diverse and, you know, see that through. I think everybody who's working on this topic is, you know, exploring different ways in which they can use their, you know, their agency to move the ball forward. We're doing the same, and I don't quite know if that means. I think it connects to the last point, which is if we can not just make this pathway visible, but make this pathway both visible and partner effectively to make it easier accessible to underrepresented groups, that's a good start. And there are nuances. You know, for example, when I talk to some of our fellows who are women versus men, they have very different experiences in the entrepreneurial kind of effort. And then the list goes on. And so you have to, if you're in the business, which we are, of cultivating talent, mentoring talent, training talent, you have to accept there's no one size fits all. And you also have to accept that you bear a responsibility to meet people where they are. And that lends itself to a very interesting question. How do we scale this, but at the same time provide the right level of support to ensure success? And it goes back to I think the previous question. We can do both. And so with that, I think I'll just turn it back to you.
Okay, join me in thanking Cyrus again for a very provoking talk. Very good. And so please join us in the center atrium. We have a little reception. And then if you want to ask Cyrus or Suds, whose PhD committee I was on, by the way, more questions, we can readily do so. So thanks again.
Okay.
I've actually got a lot of things to talk to you about